It is no secret that for a long time I've been a very big fan of Hi-Capas. I've used pretty much every brand of Hi-Capa. I've built my dream Hi-Capa, which I've done a video on, which I will put a link in the description to. It's called a Staccato. And I've also made parts for them, so I'm pretty much aiming to hit every achievement possible when it comes to the Hi-Capa platform. Now, when it comes to this lovely platform, I'm always happy to see other things being made for it. I think it's actually good to breed competition within this market, and in the end, the consumer benefits, so I don't see any issue with it. But what we don't see very often is new Hi-Capa platforms to build from. Pretty much everybody uses Tokyo Marui, and it's very rare you see people build off Wii or AW or the KJW. So recently, ICS Airsoft decided to make their own Hi-Capa. Now, this is a company that mainly makes other pistols as well as mainly AEGs, so this was sort of out of field for them. And recently, I was contacted by an ICS captain. They were very nice. His name's Liam. I'm going to put a link to his social media down below. And he was kind enough to lend me his ICS Challenger, which is the name of their Hi-Capa variant. Now, before this video goes on, I just want to say there is no sponsorship of any kind. I am free to say what I like about this, and I was just given this to borrow. I won't be keeping it, so I'm not worried about withholding any information or opinions that I might have. It's important to me to be critical to ensure that people know what they're watching and getting what they're promised. It's also worth noting, before we go ahead, that this is used. Liam has been using this avidly. He's a very big fan of it. But just be careful in case you've seen any scratches or dings or wear. I'll try and point it out, but just remember it has been used already. So already we get a quite nice box. We get this Hi-Capa logo, which I assume is their variant. Maybe they'll bring out other versions of Hi-Capa. It also has some warnings on the back, but nothing all too crazy. And on the inside, under this foam, we have our instructional manual, which I'll be sure to be using at some point. We have an ICS product manual in case you want to scan a QR code, get it on a clean PDF, maybe if you're missing the manual, or you just want to see it in digital form with high resolution pictures. And then we have the pistol itself here. So it comes with a magazine, the gun itself, and although it is not provided, it does come with a hex tool, which I will talk about later. So let's go over the magazine quickly first. So this is their Hi-Capa magazine. It's open at the front. It can only be used for right-handed users, which is fine. Most Hi-Capas are that way. It comes with a really cool, actually, chunky base plate. I actually really like this. I think it's nice. It does not come with an inlet O-ring, which means that when you fill this mag, it will spew out the sides ever so slightly. I actually sell a product on my store which helps these magazines fill silently, as well as other GBB pistol magazines and rifles. There's a link to my store in the description below, but if you want to resolve that, it can be done. And then we also have a nice cutout here on the back of the magazine valve, which is probably good if you want to unscrew that. It can never be very fun if you don't have the adequate tools. And then finally, just some standard plastic feed lips. It is worth knowing that this does work in TM Hi-Capas. This is my Staccato, which is a TM base, and it fits in it just fine, locks back, and it cycles just fine. And now we have the pistol itself. So let's zoom in a bit so we can get a better picture for it. So here we have the ICS Challenger, all in black, and we'll go over some of the aesthetics first. So we have a slide here with serrations in it to help lighten it. The slide is definitely made of metal, and it also comes with a very nifty Rmr plate. Now this plate actually has holes in it for you to fit Rmr and Doctrine cut red dot sights. I haven't mounted my own to here yet, but I can tell from the spacing here that they were more than likely to fit. This also has built-in iron sights, which are just sort of simple sort of white dots to match the front sight there at the front. Nothing too crazy, but you know, it's nice that it's all built in, and it comes with an RMR mount. We don't see that very often. We also have an undercut here, which shows the guide plug. I actually really like this. It's not very often that you see stock slides with this cut. It helps mitigate some weight. And then we have the name here, Challenger with Cal 38 Super Competition Grade, which I believe is a reference to 38 Super bullets, which is what is typically used in competition shooting. And here we can see the funky outer barrel, which is metal. It also says 38 Super Game Changer on top there. We have a wrist rail here for mounting torches and lasers should you need one. We have a plastic grip with some a grip pattern, not particularly grippy if I'm honest, but you know, it's a pattern that exists rather than being plain, and it does actually look quite nice. We have a slightly textured mag release, nothing too crazy, but it does feel nice, and the magazine's drop free. And so now we have the trigger, which actually has an adjustable screw for you to adjust the travel of your trigger if you want to make it shorter. I will say though, in my testing, this did absolutely nothing. At the minute, we actually have the screw as far as I can get it to go whilst functioning, and I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, there is still significant take up here, and it can't be eliminated. Now, if you actually put this screw any further down and you fully compress the trigger, the hammer will not fire. It will literally just stay there and nothing will happen. So at the minute, I have it as far as it will physically go whilst allowing it to work, and there is still quite a bit of take up. So yeah, slightly disappointing, but that's sort of the cards we are dealt. We then have our ambidextrous safeties here, which do work. It's nice, very simple, nothing crazy. We have an extended slide release here. This is nice, just very easy to actuate. We have our beaver tail safety, nothing too crazy, doesn't shoot unless you depress it here. So it's a little added safety function, just like any Hi-Capa. We have a mag well here, and it's nothing too crazy. There is a tiny, tiny bit of wobble, but it does the job. It has this nice cutout, which I always love, which helps you pinch mags, which especially pairs well with their magazine of choice. And that's sort of it for externals. One thing I am going to say is the slide release, the trigger, the mag release, the safeties, and the beaver tail all have a horrible paint on them. I cannot stand this paint. It's extremely reflective and it's uneven. It's not well done. It's clearly some sort of liquid paint, and it's not setting in a sort of even pattern. And I don't like it. I think it looks terrible, and there's no way to spin it. I'm not sure why they'd use that paint. Similarly, the slide has a very shiny finish, something I also don't like. I think it would all benefit from being matte. And I think the biggest confusing thing about all of this is the paint on the frame looks fine. It looks like they use different paint for almost every component except the frame, which actually has really nice paint on it. It is wearing just a little in the wear points, but I'm not too worried about that. Sort of what I would expect. The grip, I suspect, is not painted, and this is just sort of the plastic it comes with, or maybe it's dyed. Who knows? It's still nice. It's sort of a bit more grey than the rest of the blacks, sort of 50 shade of black going on here. But yeah, that's just me being picky, but that's what you're watching for. We're being critical. Now moving on to the barrel here, there is a small amount of wobble, but it doesn't seem to be affecting the inner barrel all too much, so I'm not too worried about that. It is threaded. I'm going to assume that that is 11mm clockwise. I will double check and put on screen here to see if I'm right or not, but that's what I would expect it to be. Now let's do a quick takedown and look at the internals very quickly. Now this takes down just like a normal Hi-Capa, where you pull the slide back so that the slide release matches this notch here. You poke it out from one side, pull it out from the other, and with a bit of force, for some reason, it separates into two. Then here we have our upper assembly with a slide. We have our recoil spring, a little shock buffer here, our hop-up chamber, which we'll get to in a minute, our nozzle, and our BBU, and all the sort of recoil parts of the spring and the guide plug and guide rod. Now, if you are a Hi-Capa enthusiast, you will know what this piece here is. And for those who don't know, this is a hammer protection pad. Now what this does is it stops the metal hammer smashing into the frame of the Hi-Capa. And the reason that this is bad is it can actually erode away at the frame and give you issues later down the line. It can crack your frame, and it can also actually cause full auto problems. It's a known problem from the TM Hi-Capa world. What's very cool is the Rmr Plate comes with a hammer protection pad, and yeah, it's pretty cool to see that. One thing I will note though, if we can see this here, is so there's this screw here which holds in the hammer protection pad to the BBU. However, it looks like the hammer has beaten the protection pad so that this screw can no longer come out. You can unscrew this and it will remove the Rmr Plate and iron sights from the slide and from the BBU too. So you can take it totally apart, but the hammer protection pad cannot be removed because, well, the hammer has actually deformed the metal so that it can't be removed. I'm a bit concerned that that's happened, but so be it, it's happened. So let's take this apart and just have a quick look on the insides. So here we have our recoil assembly, which is our guide rod, a washer, a sort of little short stroke buffer, and a nice and shiny aluminium guide plug. All pretty nice, very simple. This is compatible with aftermarket TM guide plugs and recoil springs, as well as short stroke kits. I tested this all myself with my own kits, which you can find a link for down below, and they fit and work very smoothly. Here we have the upper again, and we'll remove the outer barrel and the hop-up. So here we have one of the most unique parts of the Challenger. Now, the hop-up assembly is created by a company called Master Mods, and Master Mods are a sister company of ICS who produce parts for ICS guns. Now, this means that your shiny Challenger comes with a 6.04 barrel, and it is also R-hopped, which is, I believe, a first. I've never seen a pistol come R-hopped out the box, especially from a mass-produced manufacturer, so that's actually really cool, if I'm honest. It's not often you see that sort of level of innovation. However, there is one thing I really don't like about this, and that's that not only is this advertised as a TDC hop unit, which means top-down center, which means that the way the hop-up is adjusted is by applying pressure directly on top here with usually a screw that would go through the body so you could adjust it externally. But it also requires a tool to be adjusted, an Allen key. But the even more confusing thing is, even though this is a TDC, which stands for top-down center, it is actually adjusted from the bottom. There is a little hole here that you put an Allen key into, and you adjust this, and it pulls down the hop-up arm, which adjusts the nub in there. I find this very weird. It's a bit contradictory of terms, and it's also, I think, a backwards step in terms of what we can do with Hi-Capas. With Tokyo Muri and other brands, there is a hop-up wheel on the outside, which you can adjust. You can actually just take apart your upper from your lower, adjust the wheel, and put it back on. And you can do it all toolless, but now you will need to take the upper and lower off, and then get a tool and adjust it, and then put it all back together and shoot. I think this just introduces more steps than necessary, and it means carrying a tool. Not something I'm particularly a fan of. I don't know why a standard wheel couldn't be included. I feel like you would still reap the benefits of an R-hop and a 6.04 barrel, but that's the choice that they've gone with. What I will say, however, is this does shoot phenomenally well. This can easily hop up to 0.5 gram BBs, and is best ran with anything heavier than 0.3 gram BBs. It actually says this on the box. I think a 0.32 or 36 would fly particularly well with this hop-up unit. Now, whilst I am someone who is a very, very firm believer in running heavyweights in pistols and in rifles, I think there is a min-maxing and diminishing returns. For instance, I think running things like 3.6 grams in indoors is absolutely fine. I don't care if you do it. I personally do it. But I think making a gun that restricts you to only using heavier BBs is not good, because now there are players out there who would typically only use lighter weights or only afford to use lighter weights or only have access to lighter weights, now no longer can. And I think that's a bit of an issue. There are also, unfortunately, sites out there that won't allow you to use certain heavy weights, so this restricts them entirely. I'm pretty sure with anything under a 0.3 gram, this is just going to send those BBs to the sky, even on the lightest setting. So that's my little pickiness with this. Just something to consider. Other than that, that's most of the news on the hop-up unit. So we'll go and assemble that back together. Other than that, that's all my news on the hop-up unit, so we'll move on to the full slide now. So here we have the slide and the BBU with the nozzle and the nozzle return spring, and of course our Rmr plate. Now to remove all of this, you just unscrew this screw, remove this top screw, and that will allow this to slide off and your BBU to fall out. Now I have done all of this already. I will say that when I got this, the nozzle spring was broken. It was bent out of shape. I'll actually put a picture on screen of what I saw when I got it. It was definitely seeing better days, but luckily I was able to replace it with my own Hi-Capa nozzle spring. Link to that in the description as well. And now it is working perfectly fine. The BBU is good. It's a little on the heavier side. The BBU is perfectly fine and uses a combination of cup sealing and O-ring. You can just see the O-ring here and the cup sits about there. And so you get the best of both worlds when it comes to double sealing. The nozzle is definitely TM compatible. It's a very similar shade to the KJW red nozzle, so I am slightly skeptical that they might be the same, but I can't confirm or deny that. And the BBU itself is slightly on the heavier side. We're approaching the sort of 40 gram territory, so not very lightweight. I will also say that this Rmr plate does move. There is slight movement from side to side. Let me see if I can get that on camera. Now, again, I am being picky, but when I actually got this, I needed to tighten down all these screws, and it was a lot less movement, but still not great. There were remnants of blue Loctite on there, so it's clear that they're trying to keep it on sturdy to prevent this wobble. It's unfortunate that it's there, but that's the best we can do with this sort of build. On my TM Staccato, there is no wobble when it comes to the Rmr plate. There is absolutely no movement, but then again, that is a £600 slide set, so it is much more expensive than this, but still something you should consider. The rear sight plate does move just enough, and if I can move it with my hands just ever so slightly, the recoil and vibrations over time will affect this. There's no nice way to spin it. So let's assemble all this back together really quickly. And now we will move on to the lower. I have already talked about this screw already. It's unfortunate that it doesn't adjust appropriately, but that's what we're left with. In terms of trigger brake, there's definitely a wall. It's definitely quite defined. It's not like a 100% hammer spring from Tokyo Marui. And it doesn't seem to like to reset with the trigger depressed. Maybe that's because the screw is too far back, but just something to note. Something I also like about the frame though, we have full rails here. You don't actually get this with TM pistols, and you actually only get it on the advanced frames, which are the best part of £180. So this is actually very welcome sort of change and upgrade to the Hi-Capa world. It keeps the slide much more stable, less vibrations, less wobbling. It looks nice, and it's just an overall better design. So it's nice to see that improvement. Now, something else I like is there is a screw here on the frame, a little small grub screw, that can be adjusted up and down, which allows you to shim the hop-up chamber to the frame. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is actually a really good feature. It's done in sort of advanced Hi-Capa tuning. Basically, if there's less movement between the hop-up chamber and the frame, the steadier your hop-up and inner barrel are while shooting. So you can actually adjust that to keep it nice and steady. I don't know many people who have noticed that, but I have, and that's a good change. It's very small. It's actually very easy to do, but I'm glad ICS did it. Now, the grip itself, whilst textured with deep sort of cuts for some style, it's still quite smooth, and there's not too much to say. The plastic feels okay. It's a matte finish. It fits the hand fine, but it overall doesn't blow me away. It's not like my staccato grip, which has a phenomenal texture. It's a great plastic. It has nice curves. It sits flush with the mag release super well. We don't actually get that with the ICS Challenger, but of course, it's a much cheaper gun. I know the staccato grip that I run was £50, and that's coming close to, I believe, nearly a third the cost of this entire pistol. So things add up with quality materials, and I know you've got to make stuff to a budget, but it's something you should be aware of. The mag release is fine. It sits just a little lower than the grip. Again, I'm being super nitpicky, but I am a bit of a Hi-Capa nerd, so I will be picky about these things. But overall, you would likely never notice this or see any difference or change about it. Just something to keep in mind. The magwell, as I said before, does wobble. I'll see if you can hear it. Yeah, just a little bit. Just the smallest amount. Enough that I can hear it and I can actually feel it. And I can just about see it. It does annoy me a little that that's not tighter, but now when manufacturing these Hi-Capas, it can be very tricky to know what to spend your manufacturing budget on. And ICS, I think, are just trying their best to spread it all over. The hop-up is very good, so there's clearly a lot of good money in that, even if I'm not too keen on the TDC design. But it means some places miss out, and that might be places like this magwell. Now, this also could just be this particular Challenger. It might be different as with all the other pieces I've mentioned before. This could just be a lemon, but for my eyes, this seems to be fine. It seems to be a working product, but there are some nitpicky improvements that could be made. Something I will say, just as I'm assembling this, I always find it much harder to get the upper onto the lower. I'm not sure why this is. It seems to be getting stuck on something, and I occasionally do get to slam it together correctly, but I don't know what that is, just making you aware there's something getting slightly caught up, unlike my other Hi-Capas, which sort of go on a bit more like butter. Now, as for compatibility with other brands, I have heard that the ICS Challenger is fully TM compatible, and I cannot promise or guarantee this. I know we do the same with their Hi-Capas. They promise that they're, fully TM compatible, and they're not. So it's a very tricky thing. I really would have to go through every single piece and swap it, and unfortunately that's not something I have the time for. I'm just trying to do a quick review of this, sort of like a first impressions. But yes, that's something I would just be skeptical of. I would do your research and ask some other owners what they have swapped, just in case something doesn't fit. If you're looking to buy this as a base to build from, you should feel more than welcome. You should choose to spend your money how you like. However, this does cost more than a Tokyo Marui, and I cannot promise the compatibility with aftermarket parts. That said, it's nice to see something with some innovation with the hop-up chamber, with the frame. It's nice that it has so many different cuts for RMR and Doctrine red dot sights. I like the magazine design, but it could be improved with things like paint and the quality and some of the other weirder hop-up unit and trigger design choices. But these are all things that are sort of expected with a company's sort of first Hi-Capa. There are teething issues and figuring out what fans want, and unfortunately that came after the pistol's release. Now this pistol does chrono very well. I was getting approximately 340 FPS on 0.2s and much better results with heavier BBs, of course, getting close to that 1.1 joule limit. I imagine this might vary from country to country as they do different output nozzles, so something to just keep in mind. This is just the one that I have and I'm borrowing. And just to round this off, we're going to talk about price and competitor Hi-Capas, just to round this off quickly. The ICS Challenger currently in my country, which is the UK, costs £200, which is probably close to $250, but that might change in the US depending on ICS distribution. And in Europe, you can expect similar figures. And in my opinion, that's too much money. I don't think that cost is reflected in the quality. I think the design is cool. I think there is nice innovation, but it is executed poorly. I think if you wrote everything about the ICS Challenger down on a piece of paper, it would read fantastically and it probably would be worth close to the £200 mark. But unfortunately, I don't think that was executed all too well. Whilst I think it can be a good pistol for a lower price, I personally wouldn't pay the money for this. I think you would be much better off getting a Tokyo Marui Hi-Capa and spending the difference on upgrades and maybe a few more magazines, depending on the country you're in. I know a Tokyo Marui Hi-Capa in the UK can be bought for, close to £120, and that would leave you with £80 worth of room to change the hop-up unit out and get a nicer trigger, and you can even buy Rmr plates for Tokyo Marui Hi-Capas. That said, I do appreciate change in industry, and that's not to say that ICS can't redeem the thing they've created. I don't think it's a mistake. I'm just not sure if it's worth the money, and I think there can be improvements made, and I'm really hoping ICS do. I think they are a really good company, and they do make some really cool, unique stuff, and like their AEGs, they've innovated. Their AEGs have split gearboxes and other features, and it's nice to see that they're trying to reflect this in their GBB stuff, but it needs tidying up. So that was just my quick overlook of the ICS Challenger. There are links to Liam, who is the ICS captain who lent me this, as well as my store where you can actually buy parts that fit in this. I fit a nozzle spring that worked fine, a Hi-Capa recoil and short stroke kit that I all sell that did work fine as well. So there'll be a link to that down below, as well as all our other social medias. If you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe. It goes so far for our channel, and I'm looking forward to showing you some more videos soon.